Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, December 11th, 2019. Time for yet another show. We're live today, back on the air live after a visit from the roofers. We've got another visit from the roofers scheduled for next Tuesday, so we'll have to probably go the same route next Tuesday. See, this Tuesday was only about interrupting the show, not actually doing any work. They wanted to make sure that they came and rang the doorbell at 10 o'clock and came in and said, yeah, looks like you got a... we don't have that around here. It sounds like it might happen that way up around Bill's place, but not here. Here they just say, yeah, you got a hole in your roof. And okay, so here's what we'll do for you between now and next Tuesday. Since you paid us to replace this roof 6 years ago, and you bought the 30-year shingles and a 10-year guarantee on the workmanship, we'll put a bucket here and wait for next Tuesday. And, you know, if it snows, rains, whatever, all this will be caught by the bucket, which is, of course, sitting on top of the wet, damaged drywall. So fingers crossed that it doesn't get too heavy and fall through that wet, damaged drywall. Didn't sound like a really great plan to me. But, you know, that's the one we're going with at the moment. What's the difference, right? Why not leave it to the professionals, as they always say. All right, plenty of real things to catch up on, of course. But just a heads up for next week, we'll probably go the same route and record another show. And hopefully we won't miss anything too important. Impeachment still rolling today, although I'm checking the morning Twitter readout. It looks like the worldwide trends are all in Korean or Chinese, so I can't read them. That's interesting. The top promoted worldwide trend is hashtag Oreo for Santa. So just wanted to make sure that you were up on all the relevant news. We'll catch up on the other incidental stuff with Greg Dworkin in a few minutes. Impeachment still looming. Jews lost their nationality last night here in the United States, as it turns out. That's on many people's minds. We saw, I picked this up last night on Twitter, many people bandying it about, New York Times reporting on it. Very interesting. And I guess, I don't know whether I believe it was genuinely meant to do something else, but, well, of course, in addition to all the weirdness that surrounds the story, there was the New York Times headline, which was a little bit, well, it was generous, certainly, and gave Trump the benefit of the doubt. Trump targets anti-Semitism, that sounds like a good thing, and Israeli boycotts on college campuses. That, not so much, but it's been sort of a cause celeb for the conservatives about town for some time now, who are worried that, well, there are some legitimate complaints that I guess Jewish students in some places feel somehow put out or threatened, and I imagine the feelings are genuine. When there's tussles and battles on campus over investment in Israel, vis-a-vis the apartheid system that they maintain with respect to the Palestinians there, and you know, it's like a legit area for debate, fight, battles, what have you, happening all over the place. And from one perspective, I could see where it certainly might feel threatening to some, but I think they're overstating the case. And of course, the fact that the right wing has been so adamant about their free speech on campus advocacy, and instead their general response to things is, why don't we just simply make it illegal for the other side to have that free speech too? We now have this very convoluted approach that they have decided to take to supposedly settling the problem, which, you know, like many things, leads to maybe unanticipated consequences elsewhere. Very weird idea to sign an executive order, I guess, directing the appropriate bureaus and agencies who cover such things to consider, I guess for the purposes of anti-discrimination laws, to redefine and consider Judaism not just as a religion, but also as a nationality, which I guess helps you fit in under some of the anti-discrimination laws. Although really, I would think usually, almost always, almost reflexively, all anti-discrimination laws also cover anti-religious discrimination. I find it very difficult to believe that they needed to expand things at all. But yeah, a lot of people, a lot of eyebrows raised, ears perked up, and people took notice of the idea of an executive order. I don't know if it can really do this. Officially redesignating Jews as having some other nationality than the rest of America. That doesn't sound like a great idea. Sounds familiar, though. I think it's probably been tried before in other places. Maybe you have some ideas about where those places might be. All right. Well, let's switch over here for just a moment, unless we continue with this. Greg, good morning. Are you buried under any snow today? Or
I got about 2 or 3 inches. It's very pretty. You could see the Cardinals
Very
against
nice.
the snow. And
out
I
for
put the
those
bird
Cardinals.
feeders back up because I figure Yogi was about to take his winter nap.
Yes. hope
Although
so.
some of my neighbors say, nope, he's still in the neighborhood. We're still seeing him around. Well, that's okay. I mean, Twitter tells me that in Michigan, these are called bear feeders. But I
Okay.
like to think of them as bird feeders, and they're pretty, and whatever. Yogi has a
know
lot
they
of
like
territory to
seeds so
cover,
much.
so we'll see what happens.
Okay.
Now,
We'll see.
I think it's just fascinating that the Jews have been separated out now and designated as other than
fun.
everybody else, because after all, they have dual loyalties.
Yes.
So
well,
why
we do
not
now.
treat them special?
Right.
But of course, Trump didn't go far enough. He didn't include the knitters and crocheters. I think they are their own nationality.
Yes. I would agree.
And I think that everybody really should have their own special designation. But he did what he did, and of course, the fact that he's a anti-Semitic and racist piece of crap, is not news at this particular point. What is news is that he's being impeached.
Yes. Well,
But
not
you want
news.
to talk about impeachment, or do you want to talk about the Democratic primary? Those are my two topics.
I
Which one do you
prefer
wanna do?
impeachment personally, but
Impeachment. Let's do impeachment.
all right.
So there's this interesting article about articles, and it's by Noah
That
Feldman,
is interesting. Yes.
who is a Bloomberg opinion columnist and professor of law at Harvard University.
Never heard of it.
Neither has Louis Gohmert. The legal strategy behind keeping, because he doesn't want his babies going to Harvard or Yale
Right.
or places like that, or Stanford. The legal strategy behind keeping impeachment simple. Why Democrats are focusing only on 2 compact articles of impeachment against Donald Trump. And you have to step back a little bit and scratch your head in amusement at the basic fundamental worldview of people who say, this is ridiculous. Trump needs to be impeached. He needs to be impeached now. He needs to be impeached as soon as possible. Okay, we're impeaching him. Well, you're not doing it right. You're not doing it the way I want. I wanted you to do something else. And this isn't necessarily Democrats saying this. This is Chuck Todd and a lot of the opinion makers who have their own opinion, who have never run for anything and done anything, but have lots of opinions about how everybody else should do their job. And is it too long? Is it too short? There should have been 17. There should have been 12 because you have to have an even number. Nixon had 3. Clinton had 4, but only 2 worked. What are we doing here?
Yeah. All right.
And
are we doing?
Feldman says, look, it's actually basically simple. It's remarkable and historically significant that the committee will consider just 2 very focused articles of impeachment. Andrew Johnson's impeachment featured 11 articles.
Yes. Okay.
I had to double check that and just make sure it wasn't the Roman numeral 2 that lawyers tend to use all the time, just
especially
to
when you're talking
confuse
about
us.
articles, right?
Yeah, Article 1, Section 5, 1B, and then little Roman numeral 3. But no, this is 11 articles. Richard Nixon, who managed to resign after the House Judiciary Committee approved articles of impeachment, but before the House adopted them, faced 3. Clinton was impeached with 2, but they contained 4 and 7 subparts, respectively, corresponding to 4 alleged grand jury lies and 7 alleged acts of obstruction of justice.
I have only one question. Yes. All right.
In contrast, Trump will face charges that are extraordinarily simple and compact. The first article will allege the high crime and misdemeanor of abuse of power. It'll state that Trump abused the office of the presidency for personal advantage in soliciting investigations of political opponents from the president of Ukraine in order to influence the 2020 election, and that in doing so, Trump put his personal gain ahead of the national interest. And the second article will charge that Trump obstructed Congress by flatly refusing to participate in the impeachment inquiry and by ordering the entire executive branch not to participate. Now, I forget exactly where because I don't have it in front of me. It was probably in the first article. But they actually included the language, he did this like he's done before, which is, of course, a shout out to the Mueller part of it. And the second article will charge Trump with obstructing Congress, but I think they also have reference, if I'm not mistaken, to obstructing government inquiries, which is also a subtle shout out to the Mueller report.
Yes.
But the decision by House leadership to focus in a laser-like way on these two charges is wise in light of their goals, but wasn't at all an obvious choice. Since becoming president, Trump has committed a striking number of acts that could qualify as high crimes and misdemeanors under the Constitution, and most prominently, Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report provided extensive evidence that Trump obstructed justice in attempting to fire Mueller and in ordering White House counsel Don McGahn to lie about his attempt to do so. Now, keep that in mind. Don McGahn is the center of the obstruction of justice thing.
Yes.
Yet, the decision to impeach is roughly analogous to the decision a prosecutor makes to bring charges against a criminal. Now, you may read the whole thing, or you can just think about how Capone got sent up for tax evasion, not murder, even though we all knew he was a murderer. Prosecutors can only bring charges if they have evidence that the criminal is guilty. Even then, not every criminal act gets prosecuted or needs to be. Prosecutors must weigh the public consequences of a prosecution. They must ask themselves whether there are mitigating factors that weigh against bringing charges. Even against somebody they believe to be guilty, prosecutorial discretion is a crucial component of the job of being a prosecutor. Similarly, congressional leadership has the responsibility of exercising what we might call impeachment discretion in the case of a president. Not every constitutionally impeachable act can or should be impeached. Judgment is required. Now, before going on, again, I have to throw in a hat tip to Nancy Pelosi here. It isn't that everything Pelosi does is right. It isn't that Nancy Pelosi was playing 11D dimension chess and knew that this was going to happen and picked just the right time. She was pushed into it. We all know that. But a lot of the criticism of her, again, are from people who's never had to do this, who have no idea how difficult it is. Somebody likened Pelosi's job to juggling chainsaws and kittens at the same time, keeping both happy.
Chainsaws.
And in fact, it's a difficult thing, and she pulled it off. So the House leadership has exercised its impeachment discretion to focus on Trump's conduct as revealed in the now famous July 25th, 2019 phone call. To be sure, all the supporting evidence that emerged in the House hearings laid bare the details, but the most important facts were already known once the rough transcript of the call was released.
Yes. Read it.
As Feldman, has argued, he says, including in my testimony before the House Judiciary Committee, the call on its own provided enough evidence to justify impeachment for abuse of power. Now, no doubt Democrats will argue Ukraine-related charge demonstrates a pattern because the rest of the conduct cannot be explained as simply or delineated as sharply as the Ukraine conduct. In essence, the House leadership is wagering that simplicity will help make the public case. And even if the Senate ultimately doesn't convict Trump, the historical record will retain that simplicity.
Okay.
Now, as for obstruction of Congress, here the simplicity captures a basic reality. No other president has ever stonewalled Congress entirely when it comes to impeachment. The House leadership will have to do more to explain why that's important, he says. And historians will look back and wonder why the charges against Trump were so compact given the range of his misconduct. The answer is Democrats determined not that Trump hadn't committed more, but that the public would be able to understand and focus on these two. Whether that strategy works should not only be judged by the outcome in the Senate, but also by the judgment of history, by the results of the 2020 election. In that election, by the way, the latest Quinnipiac poll that just came out says that every prospective Democratic nominee beats Trump. Biden 51, Trump 42, Sanders 51, Trump 43, et cetera, et cetera. They're all like that. Even Klobuchar, even Buttigieg. And the thing is that if you're going to also try to include something like obstruction of justice, as I mentioned before, Don McGahn is right in the middle of it. Well, the problem with that is that in order to really nail that down, you have to have Don McGahn say, yes, he did these things, firsthand, not hearsay. In order to do that, you got to get him to testify. In order to do that, you got to go through all the way up to the Supreme Court and Trump stonewalling about not allowing the people who know to testify, and therefore that takes us into 2021. And so that's why they decided not to go that route. Noah Feldman didn't say that, but that seems pretty obvious.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good explanation for it. I mean, there are any number of things that could happen after this. I don't know whether that's
Now,
something
and
that
again, I'm not saying that Feldman's absolutely right, and this is
Oh,
absolutely the
it's his
only way to
best
do it.
guess.
But it certainly makes sense in terms of looking at it in that way. These are the two you could prove. These are the two we're going with. Yes, there were other things. What we did is we subtly worked in. We didn't say it's really that Trump obstructed congressional investigations. He obstructed government investigations. That includes Mueller. But the fact of the matter is that if you spend all your time talking about Mueller and what Barr says, you get an idea of how muddied that is to the public, whereas this is clear. And the funny thing is that the House Intelligence Committee came out before Barr had a chance to put his finger on the scale and actually doesn't get to weigh in on it. And then when something does come out, like the Inspector General saying that there was nothing wrong with going ahead and looking at 2016 because Trump was obviously compromised enough so that people had doubts about it, Barr says, I don't think that. My own investigation is going to show something different. And it's really not having the same impact as when he muddied up the Mueller report because people are kind of wise to what he's doing now.
True also, yes. Okay.
Right.
Well,
so this is what they're doing. And so is it going to work? Is it not going to work? You know, this is the team they field. This is the strategy they took. It's not a bad one. You may find fault with it, and you're absolutely invited to criticize it, but it's not like it's stupid and it doesn't make sense any more than Pelosi is stupid and doesn't make sense. Well, let's talk something else that Pelosi did yesterday.
Okay.
Which the media got mostly wrong and then sort of corrected.
Yes.
And the way I say sort of corrected is I actually sent you a mashup. It's in the Daily Kos Pundit Roundup. It's my header picture that I made.
I can see it there. All right.
And it's the Washington Post and the New York Times in terms of how they covered the big stories yesterday. Because, again, there was the IG report and Barr trying to muddle it. There was the NAFTA 2.0. I refuse to call it what Trump calls it.
Oh, yes, right.
And, of course, there were the impeachment articles. And there was also a federal judge blocks Trump's plan to build border wall using military funds.
Oh.
And, of course, ongoing Afghanistan papers out showing that the government was completely lying about everything, especially the military, in terms of what was going on. So how does this get handled by the big papers, New York Times, Washington Post? Impeachment articles, Trump betrayed the nation. That is by far the biggest story. You can't even find the NAFTA 2.0. And in terms of how Washington Post handled it, they have Day of History accentuates distortions of truth in the Trump era. So they focus on the fact that Trump lies all the time and disseminates misinformation, which is highly important. Barr sharpens attack on FBI's Russia probe, dismaying some in his department. So he doesn't get the credit that people would hope that he got, despite the awful puff piece interview by Pete Williams on NBC. And then at the bottom of this picture capturing the front page of the Washington Post, at least the digital version, we ate their lunch. Democrats claim legislative victories with dealmaker Trump. And that's, of course, about NAFTA 2.0. And the reason that it says that is because that's what Pelosi told her conference. And then as she first announces the impeachment articles and then goes ahead and announces we're all in on NAFTA 2.0, except we'll call it whatever Trump wants to call it, she makes the point that Trump had a terrible deal. We got involved. We made it better. And we are going to take credit for getting this thing passed. And immediately, Richard Trumka, AFL-CIO, said, this is a great deal. Thank you so much, Nancy Pelosi. I also wanted to thank Ian Lighthizer, who is the trade rep. He didn't even mention Trump, just to give you an idea what the politics look like there. And so immediately, those who like to criticize Democrats say, oh, this is terrible for Democrats. Why would they go ahead and give Trump such a big victory? As I just described to you, it's really not a big victory for Trump. And although the media tried on cable TV to focus in on two things. Why are the Democrats giving such a big victory to Trump? And isn't this a confusing message? You want to impeach him, but at the same time you want to work with him? That faded in like 2 hours because it was such a dumb line. The fact of the matter is it's not really a big victory for Trump. It's a modest change compared to what NAFTA was. Trump can take credit for it all he wanted. He would have taken credit for it if it failed. That doesn't matter. What matters is, first of all, is it going to pass at all? And looking at the politics, AFL-CIO is all for it. And the person who's against it is Mitch McConnell. He doesn't even want to bring it to the floor.
No.
So that gives you an idea of where this is going. Well, we can't do that till next year. We got impeachment to do. And so the whole talking point that the Republicans had, well, the Democrats can't focus on anything but impeachment. And Democrats are saying, well, we just passed this. If you guys don't want to pass it, that's your problem, not ours. So that talking point goes out the window. And so, again, you go back and say, well, what's going on here? You look back at the election in 2018 where Democrats did quite well. You look at Quinnipiac polling and others saying that at least at the moment, this is a bigger lead for the Democrats, no matter which candidate you pick, compared to where Clinton led Trump at this point in 2016. It's like twice the margin. So the strategy is fine. I mean, it's not guaranteed to work. That's not what I'm saying. But again, stepping back and saying, I've never done this, but all of you people who were doing this are incredibly stupid, and let me tell you why. You look at the facts and you look at the environment and saying, you know what, it doesn't really sound all that stupid. It might work, it might not work, but there's certainly logic behind all of it. Democrats are saying, I'm sorry, we don't really want to impeach him, but we have to. And we'll work with him where we can. But the fact of the matter is, impeachment comes first. It comes first in terms of the Pelosi press conferences. It comes first in terms of how the media is handling it. Look at those headlines. NAFTA 2.0 is not a huge win for Trump. Nobody's going to remember that in 2 days. They didn't even remember it 6 hours after it passed. And focuses on impeachment, and more impeachment.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to have it that way. Yeah, that was.
By the way, Greta Thunberg is Time Magazine's 2019 Person of the Year.
Right. That's true. And I saw about 5 people within minutes tweeting, this is going to drive Trump crazy. And I mean, he's already there. But, it's like Uber, but for driving Trump crazy. I'm glad to see that. I hope it does. I mean, he's already bonkers, of course. I don't know whether he really cares about that or not, but if it...
Well,
if it
the funny part is that
terrific.
When...
I mean, he thinks he should be
the part we should throw in,
obviously.
because it's also important to the whole big story here, is that when Chris Wray was asked about the IG report, unlike Barr, Wray said, yeah, it's all true. And then Trump started tweeting really, really nasty things about him. And one of the things Trump said is, I don't know what report Chris Wray read, because the one I read didn't say anything like that. And I'm thinking with Greta Thunberg on Time, somebody probably sent Trump another copy of the Trump Time Person of the Year that he has hanging in his golf courses. That, of course, isn't true. It's a fake picture. And said, look, Mr. President, you got picked again. Yeah. And by the way, here's this report in crayon in cartoon form for 2 pages explaining to you how the IG said you were right and Obama did everything and he was the source of talking to Putin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one.
So Trump's right. Probably the report he saw had nothing to do with what.
I'm sure that's the case, and of course, I mean the idea of the report I read. Yeah, okay, that was the 400-pager.
What, you could read?
There was no chance.
That first.
Right. I mean,
you don't know you don't read.
Give me a break. I doubt he even read an executive summary of the thing. So they told him, this garbage report. Anyway, I'm sure he didn't read it because. Well, if he did, he'd be I don't know, I guess jumping off the roof of the White House at this point. But
right. Anyway, Lawrence Tribe weighed in on that Noah Feldman piece that I recited to you, and says, the simplicity of the 2 Trump articles is a great virtue. It's also a bit of an illusion because both articles contain language pointing to a consistent pattern of similar previous conduct, a language that opens a multitude of windows. The thing is, if Republicans want to go down that route, Democrats can fight that battle. If they don't have to. If Democrats tried to do obstruction of justice, they would have been forced to go down that route. And so one of the interesting things that's happening now, and boy, you better put on your procedure hat for this, is the big discussion that we don't know yet as to exactly how the rules of the Senate are going to have this trial happen. Mm-hmm. Chuck Schumer's negotiating with McConnell about the rules of how it will happen. What if they don't agree? Does that mean that how is it get decided if they can't decide on the rules? If it's going to be Republican-only rules and the trial's going to be for 5 minutes, that's going to look terrible for them.
Yes.
And then I saw a suggestion that if they can't agree on the rules, then it actually gets to the point where whatever rules get 51 votes, 51% and 151 votes, that's how they're going to do it. I don't think that'll happen. McConnell doesn't allow that sort of thing. But it's quite interesting to think of what happens if Schumer and McConnell cannot agree on what the rules are going to be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they can't agree on what the rules are going to be, then it's done with a majority vote. They have to move forward with something, so they'll force something through, and the question will be how much effort they put into trying to find a different way.
Right, but again, step back a little bit and just look at procedure writ large,
yes,
and some of the principles that David Waldman has taught all of us on this show. Whoever has the gavel basically gets to make the rules,
yes,
more or less, except for when it doesn't happen. And it's a bit tougher in the Senate than the House, but if you have 51 votes, there's a lot of things that you can do. It's not clear that the Republicans have majority votes on this. People like Susan Collins, who have to be up for re-election, and by the way, she's going to announce whether she's running again or not soon. She promised to do it by the end of fall, and the end of fall's here. So, what happens with that? And also, a lot of the things that are going to occur will be predetermined by whatever, and I don't mean this in a formal designation, but whatever rules committee, whatever rules vote comes to pass is often the key vote and not the yes or no that comes later. And we're going to watch this play out in the Senate because it's going to be so key. This is all uncharted ground. So if you really want to know what's going on in the Senate, you have to keep a close eye on those procedural rules because they're going to really tell us where senators stand on this.
Yes. All right. They are indicative of where they stand and where they hope to stand later on. And although sometimes they're just dismissed in the reporting as test votes, I never really understood that term.
Right. If you don't have the votes, it tells you something.
Well, that's true. I mean, there's that. But I don't really know where they're going to come down on this. I can't imagine that they would just open themselves up to an extensive procedure if it's their intent to exonerate him at the end. We will see what happens, and we'll begin seeing in 2 minutes from now. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I had a thought while we were away. When we left, we were just talking about the difficulty that might ensue if McConnell and Schumer can't agree on ground rules for the impeachment proceedings. And, there's some weird and interesting twists. Ordinarily, McConnell doesn't shy away from, when necessary, using the power of his majority, narrow though it may be, to force things through the way he wants them. Although his preference, certainly, for the use of raw power tends to be in the use of the rules in the negative. That is to say, where he can say, well, the rules don't force me to do X, Y, Z. He simply will not do X, Y, Z, as opposed to, for instance, just outright changing the rules or establishing new precedents. He's done both, to be sure, but even with respect to, say, the nuclear option, where they removed the use of the filibuster for even for Supreme Court appointments, he was able to point to previous precedent and say we're simply extending it. And quite honestly, I guess once you do that for judges, it doesn't make any particular sense not to do it for all judges, though, some people see a difference between the Supreme Court and other places on the federal bench. But I guess the real complicating factor will be using raw political power once the trial has begun becomes somewhat difficult, in the sense that if you are overruling a ruling from the chair during the trial on some point of law, you've got the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court sitting in that seat. And it makes a difference whether you are overruling the mostly unknown, mostly nameless Senate parliamentarian who is simply whispering in the ear of another Republican senator who's sitting in the chair, versus overruling the person that, well, I was going to say everybody knows, but presumably most people watching the trial know is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And when he's ruling on a point of law or any of that constitutional point, the presumption is that he knows what he's talking about. And overruling that with 51 votes from Republicans, many of whom are rather dotardly themselves, it could become a problem. But
it could become a problem because that would have serious consequences for the 2020 election.
Right. So then it would really look like, wow, they're really steering this politically. To tell the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court he doesn't know what he's talking about with respect to a point of law or a constitutional point it's a bigger deal than saying, well, again, to a bureaucrat and or another Republican senator that they don't know. Now, on the other hand, this fight will be over. If the fight is over the ground rules, that will mean that the trial hasn't started yet, and the Chief Justice isn't there yet, and the fight is more typical, and it's between senators and perhaps the parliamentarian. And I imagine that his majoritarian brute force maneuvers are going to have to be completed ahead of time. So that may be the place that he's forced to have that fight with Schumer and to do things with a bare majority vote in order to lay the ground rules so that when the Supreme Court Chief Justice rolls in and then finds himself perhaps forced to operate by those rules, lopsided though they may be, McConnell finds himself in a much easier position. If you can circumscribe the ability of the Chief Justice to maneuver against you ahead of time, you're going to want to take advantage of that, and even if you have to do it in ugly fashion. So that would be my McKinsey analysis of it if I were handing a report over to McConnell on that one.
McKinsey are the people that did your roof, right?
Yes, they are. They're the ones who gave me a bucket and then told me to fire it.
So I want to talk about McKinsey because I want to shift gears a little bit and start talking about the Democratic primary.
Okay,
and
yes, good.
McKinsey means, I have to explain this probably to a lot of the White House officials who don't seem to understand this, but McKinsey means Pete Buttigieg.
Okay, right. So like Burisma.
Yeah, like Burisma means Biden. McKinsey means Pete Buttigieg. Now, there's a very interesting article by a columnist I don't particularly like, Megan McArdle, who talks a little bit about why McKinsey has become a problem for Pete Buttigieg. Is it really a problem? Look, Pete Buttigieg's problem is people of color.
Oh.
But for white elites, it's something of a McKinsey problem. Okay. And so Megan McArdle says, why do so many people with elite degrees make their living telling other people how to run their business rather than just, say, cutting out the middleman and running a business? As it happens, she says, I have an answer.
Oh.
In 2001, on the verge of completing an MBA, I accepted a job with a boutique strategy consulting firm. I never actually worked there. The dot-com bubble burst, but I remember well why I wanted to work there so badly. For one thing, the hiring process soothingly replicates the process of admission to an elite school. You slide down a well-greased chute from informational mixers to on-campus interviews through second and third round interviews and smoothly to a job offer, maybe several. After a brief period of agonizing, you choose a firm, generally the highest status destination, for they have a known hierarchy like colleges do. And just like that, your future settled for the next few years without the arduous labor of figuring out what industry you want to work in and finding a company that'll hire you, right? And nor are you going to be asked to do scut work. That's not what they call it. That's what we call it. In other words, these jobs are custom designed for maximal appeal to the upper middle brow conformists who excel at navigating elite education. I suspect that Buttigieg's consulting experience stirred up so much antagonism because he and McKinsey were standing in for that whole class of people whose lives revolve not around any particular competency, but simply around being smart, with smart defined as having leaped to a certain number of educational hurdles in the prescribed manner, after which you earn the right to tell everybody else their business.
Yeah, that resonates to some extent, yeah.
To some extent it does. New York Times columnist Ross Douthat identifies this as a weariness with experts who don't deliver, but I think this slightly misses the mark. For one thing, for all the flack they take, consultants actually do often deliver. It's just not necessarily what critics want them to.
Well, that's almost certainly true.
I think of a consultant friend who assisted with a complex analysis for a commodity producer. The analysis calculated that the client's best return on investment came from lobbying the government, which is probably correct, but arguably immoral.
Yes, all right.
Right? More prosaically, these are the consultants so often called in when something is badly wrong. Often management understands how to fix the problem, but needs an objective outside voice to say aloud what everyone already kind of knows, but would stir fierce internal resistance, such as shut down this badly underutilized facility. The problem isn't necessarily the self-appointed experts are wrong. Often they're right. They're just telling us stuff we don't want to hear, and one can understand why the more rooted and less high-flying resent hearing it from the very folks who refuse to make the binding commitments to one place or one business that might leave them vulnerable to exactly the kind of economic disruption they're paid to deliver. In a different way, a lot of years ago, I read to you a college roommate's analysis of venture capitalism. He's a venture capitalist.
Yeah.
And basically says what people don't understand, especially on the left, is that the workforce is a negative on the bottom line.
Cost center.
These are things that cost money. And so it isn't a question of how can we increase the number of jobs or how can we, make sure that our workforce is doing their it's the exact opposite. It's how can we get rid of the workforce? Because that's how you make the most money. And so, it's not a question of good or bad, but this is what we're doing. And if you don't understand that, you don't understand what we do.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's true. The only thing that they can usually
So if you say,
quantify
I'm
is the
running
dollars.
for president because I want to be a progressive populist, and I'm one of these people.
Yes, that's
Deval Patrick
is that good?
being at Bain doesn't help.
No.
Mike Bloomberg isn't making a dent, even though he's already spent $100 million in advertising, and probably will spend $100 million more. Pocket change to him, but it's not moving the numbers very much. We'll go over the numbers in just a minute. And if you're a consultant, you've got a problem. You got to explain to your constituency, who are the people that you just recommended lose their jobs, why I'm good for you, so you can vote for me, because I didn't see it was a problem at the time, and it's only a problem now because I want your votes, and maybe you should forget about what I did. After all, I was really young.
Well, right, and it's easy to think
It was like
him.
half hour ago because I'm still young.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's a good explanation. I don't think it's an effective one. I mean, but it's probably a good one. Like, hey, that sounds right. You didn't know what you were doing. Oh, right. We're supposed to think you do know.
Max Kennerly, who I was having this discussion with on Twitter, says, in my humble opinion, it's haunting him in part because he won't admit he was junior level, because it highlights his inexperience.
Yeah.
And B, won't bluntly say, look, this is capitalism, like my venture capitalist friend was proud to say.
Yes. Because
he wants to feign he's progressive. That leaves him with horrible answers like Medicare for all kills jobs, which is what he said on TV when he was asked about it.
Bye.
So that puts him in a really, really tough position. Bloomberg, in the meantime, who's
tough.
no stranger to capitalism, let alone racism.
Although he is stranger.
Bloomberg's bad bet on the presidency from Josh Kraushaar, after spending more than $90 million in ads reintroducing himself, his presidential bid doesn't look like it's going anywhere. Let's turn to the numbers a little bit and look and see how that plays out. So Steve Cosell is one of my favorite pollsters. He does a lot of the Massachusetts polling over at WBUR.
Oh, okay.
And he starts the morning by saying, I'm finding a surprising number of Americans with 27 followers and 3,000 tweets interested in New Hampshire primary polling this morning.
Well, and a lot of numbers in their names, too.
Yeah, and I said to him, well, those are swing voters named Ivan. And he said, yep, that's a key get out the vote target for sure. So, New Hampshire polling. Our new New Hampshire Democratic primary poll for WBUR. Buttigieg, 18. Biden, 17. Sanders, 15. Warren, 12. So, Warren, Sanders, Biden, Buttigieg, and we're going to talk a little bit about details there. Gabbard, 5. Yang, 5. Klobuchar, 3. Steyer, 3. Bloomberg, 2 for all the money he's spending. And everybody else, 1 or less. And that would include people like Cory Booker.
Oh.
Right?
Yes.
And Christopher Calidaco notes, of the top 4, only Mayor Pete has support from more men than women. Warren's support is split. Bernie cleans up with young people, 18 to 29, and Biden dominates with the 60-plus votes. So if you're looking on what's going on there, it's fascinating because, for example, let me give you the age groups. Okay. We can't talk about people of color here because it's New Hampshire, so they're not a big enough group to really focus on here. But age groups, 18 to 29. Bernie, 28. Biden, 3.
Okay.
And if you think that's impressive, 60 plus, Biden, 32. Sanders, 6. A bit of an age gap there. That's probably the biggest thing. Education level. Okay, high school or less, Biden 29, Bernie 8, Warren 3, Yang 10. Yang is doing better with high school or less than Bernie is.
Well,
and Buttigieg is at 14. Okay, but if you're looking at advanced degrees, that's Mayor Pete, that's 23, and Warren at 20, Biden at 11, and Sanders at 8.
Okay.
So just, these are really, really split demographics here.
Yeah.
And everybody has their strengths. Everybody has their weaknesses. It doesn't mean that you don't like the other guy. I'm just saying this is their first choice here. But there's sharp differences, as they point out, in support for top Democratic candidates by age and education. That's all. And it's a really, really interesting way to look at, and that's New Hampshire. Then the polling that came out yesterday was from Quinnipiac, and that's pretty fascinating as well.
Yes.
Okay. And that's the poll that said that Biden 51, Trump 42, Sanders 51, and Trump 43, et cetera, et cetera. But in that particular poll, Ryan Struck from CNN points out that 2020 National Quinnipiac poll among black voters, again, we're talking national now, Biden 51, Sanders 13, Warren 12, don't know 10, Bloomberg 4, Buttigieg 2, Klobuchar 2, Steyer 2, Yang 2, everybody else 1 or less. So Joe Biden's strength, obviously, is with people of color.
Yes.
That has not changed. And Buttigieg is doing terribly there. And so Buttigieg doesn't really have a McKinsey problem. That's for upper-class white elites. Buttigieg has a people of color problem. And whoever wins the Democratic primary is going to have to, attract people of color or it ain't happening.
Yes.
That doesn't mean that Biden is a lock to win by any means. But again, and I've said this over and over, a lot of our listeners don't particularly like Biden. But I'm not tempted to do a Mick Mulvaney and say get over it. I am tempted to say, look, you have to look at his support and look to see where it's strongest. If you expect him to erode, you're not seeing it in his strongest constituency at this particular point. So at this particular point, that leaves us with Biden still doing fairly well.
Yes. So it would appear. All right. Okay, so it's not done yet.
No. The thing about New Hampshire is if you're going to look at who's winning the New Hampshire primary with a good pollster like Steve Costello, the answer is, I don't know.
No.
Any of them could win.
So it'll be a big surprise.
But it's, any of the top 4. But it's not going to be Steyer. It's not going to be Bloomberg. No. It's not going to be Yang.
Oh, not Yang. Well, all the kids will be upset. We may have, I guess we could, so let's see. We may end up with different winners in the first, 4 states.
Yes, we could.
All
Or we
four.
could have Bernie sweeping everything. I mean, it's just
Well,
really,
it's possible.
you don't know.
Right, and look, I'm looking at don't know. It's 10% right there in that same
Right
poll.
there. Exactly.
So that don't know is huge.
One of the UK posters just threw something up there this morning that I was laughing at. Just that helps us with our analysis here. It says, I still think my favorite thing that's ever happened to me on the internet is the time a guy said to me, you know, people change their minds when you show them facts. And I said, actually, studies show it's not true. And I linked too. And he said, yeah, well, I still think it does.
See? There you go.
See?
It
I've
works.
just run rings around you logically.
Perfect. Okay. Man, I can't believe the primary's not over.
Right.
This is unbelievable.
Anyway, Quinnipiac's write-up is Buttigieg slips, Biden and Sanders gain in primary, Quinnipiac University National Poll finds. By the way, slightly more than half of voters say don't impeach Trump. This Quinnipiac poll has always been we're not really in favor of impeachment. It's not a huge change. Really, the numbers haven't changed all that much. But if you're looking for signs that there's backlash against the Democrats for voting on impeachment, you won't be finding it in any of these polls.
Well, they haven't done it yet, so there can't be backlash. This would be front lash.
Maybe.
Yes, just lash.
Pre-backlash is what we like to call it.
Yeah, okay. They need a term of art for this.
Now, right now, just focusing on Biden because there's so many numbers available. 51% say they would vote for Biden, 42 Trump. Mentioned that. That compares to an October 8th poll where Biden beat Trump 51-40. Sanders in this poll gets 51, Trump 43. The older poll had Sanders over Trump 49-42. So really there's no movement there. But what they throw in, which I like, at this point in the 2016 election cycle, 47-41 Clinton over Trump.
Okay.
Right. So what's a 9 or 10 point lead now? And this is mostly 8, 7, 8, 9 points, was a 6 point lead at the time. So not quite double. But the point of all of this is if you look against the incumbent, forget about the Democratic name and number that I read to you, concentrate on the Trump number. Okay. So Biden, 51, Trump 42. Sanders, 51, Trump 43. Warren, 50, Trump 43. Michael Bloomberg, 48, Trump 42. Buttigieg, 48, Trump 43. Klobuchar, 47, Trump 43. So the point of all of this is that Trump remains stuck in the low 40s. And I have news for all the pundits. If he stays in the low 40s with the vote preference, he's not winning, and it doesn't matter what kind of electoral college, so-called advantage he has.
Well, I hope not.
Not happening.
Jeez, I can't see. I mean, I don't know why. I don't know whether it's a good bet to believe that he stays there, but at this stage of the game,
well, that's the thing. Wouldn't you think that Republicans would rally around him during this impeachment thing? It's true that it's early. It's true it's a year away. But the fact of the matter is we're already galvanizing the negative response or the negative partisanship with this impeachment stuff, and he's still in the low 40s.
Yeah. I mean, it's been all the rage. All the kids are talking about it, and
he's been in the low 40s the entire time.
Yeah,
so
that's a good point.
Magically, he's going to all of a sudden be 50 at the time of the election. I'm sorry, you'll have to show me that before I believe it. And one last thing before I leave, and this gets back to the USMCA, or as I like to call it, NAFTA 2.0, because it's really not an incredible achievement. Amy Walter points out, I don't quite understand the framing that USMCA is a victory only for Trump. If you're a freshman Democrat in a swing CD, congressional district for you listeners at home, you explicitly ran on being able to be a check on Trump and get stuff done for your congressional district. Makes it harder for a Republican argument that Democrats are just partisan hacks. Now, it doesn't make it impossible. They can say anything they want because they're not tethered to reality. But that's the thing. Trump was going to claim victory even if he lost. So this isn't any more or less of a victory that he's going to claim than any other time.
Well, that's true. He's just going to claim victory for everything.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, there was an awful lot of criticism also yesterday about the idea of swinging so quickly between the press conferences and what.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You know, it's the fact of the matter is that you can walk and chew gum at the same time. You can show people you can do both. It turns out that it's a double win for Democrats because everybody was saying it's a win for Trump, and McConnell's running away from it.
Yeah.
So, I don't understand so what is the problem here? Why is it even an issue that, and if you thought that this was a big win for Trump, let me tell you, as we started out the segment, it all got buried by impeachment news. Duh.
Yes. Yeah, and it's interesting, too, how quickly the tune changed even for McConnell, because the early part of the day was all about how the delay in moving this agreement, this so-called trade agreement, was all on Pelosi, and that it was political in nature, and that she delayed, and now here, by the afternoon, he's the one pushing it off. I don't know whether that caught anybody's attention or what.
Well, I just sent you, having it caught people's attention, the Hill writes, McConnell says Senate won't take up Trump's new trade deal this year. And Mikey Aong writes, if you have any doubts about whether USMCA was a victory for Democrats, McConnell is trying to slow walk it, expressing doubts.
Okay. Well, I guess that could be used as evidence against you in a court of law if we could ever get our hands on you, McConnell.
And what about in Congress?
Yeah, I guess so. But, well, he can't be impeached, though we could expel him. But I don't think there's not enough votes in the Senate for that.
I'm just saying, that Moscow Mitch is not particularly happy about it. That's all I'm saying.
All right. And unhappy enough to be the one who's slow walking it after spending the morning accusing Nancy Pelosi of being the one that slow walked it.
Right.
All right.
Anyway, that's the story for today. That's pretty much the summary. It's really it's not a slam dunk for Democrats. It's really not a bad 24 hours at all. And if things stay the way they are, Trump loses. He's banking on the fact that he's putting millions of dollars into these swing states and counting on Fox News to rev up the voters. I'm saying, okay, fine, they're doing that now, and the polling isn't really indicating an incredible swing in his favor, nor is it against. Things are where they are, and if people have already made up their mind, that's going to be a lot of money wasted. But then again, ask Mike Bloomberg. He knows about that thing. That kind of thing.
Well, I mean, I would like at least to burn as much Republican money as Democratic, honestly, or whatever Bloomberg is. At least, I guess it's not burning Democratic donor money if Bloomberg pays all this, but it is burning Republican donor money. So I guess I'm for that. Right. And then just burning Bloomberg's money.
Yep. Anyway, that's it for me for today. I have to go clean up some snow and get rid of some of the ice, but hopefully McKinsey will fix your roof. What day are you getting work done next week?
Next Tuesday. So
on Tuesday?
Keeping it out of the way of our schedule, so that's good.
Yeah, well, it's good for me, not good for you.
No, but, well, it's not so bad. Sometimes having the show recorded ahead of time is a big relief for me, although sometimes I worry that we'll be la-di-dying our way through something and, Trump will resign in the middle of the show and we don't have any way of getting on the air and saying so. But, he's not really about to do that. But you never know what he will be doing in the middle of the show.
Okay, I'll give you something else to talk about if you want. For a few minutes until the break. And that is that Biden's sort of signaling that, he might only do one term.
Oh, yeah. Right. Well,
which would, of course, make it huge in terms of who he picks as his vice president, be it Kamala Harris or Stacey Abrams. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of interesting. And whether that has any relevance at all, I don't know. Remains to be seen.
Yeah.
We'll just have to wait.
I guess so. Yeah, we'll see what kind of impact that has. I think people probably had guessed that for a long time.
Based on his age? I would say so.
Yeah. And, people thought it made a certain amount of sense. Although, yeah, I have also seen questioned right away. Questions were being posed. Does a transitional figure make sense at this stage of the game?
Or as Kristen Welker and MSNBC would say, doesn't this cast a cloud on his thinking? Well, everything does, doesn't it? He's a Democrat.
That's true. All right. Well, yeah, we'll have to see whether he acknowledges that at any point, or whether he thinks that's a net positive for him. I don't know.
I don't know. It's a trial balloon, like all trial balloons.
So.
It should be treated as such. If people don't like it, he'll say, I never said that.
Right. Yeah, okay. So a trial in the Senate for this balloon is what you're saying.
Yeah. We shall see.
Very good.
Anyway,
Thanks, Greg.
Congratulations, Greta, and I'll talk to you on tomorrow because it's only like tomorrow.
Right, true. That's the way our schedule goes. All right, Roof.
Alrighty, take care.
We'll be talking. Great, thanks. You do the same. We will catch up on the rest of the news currently circulating. And I guess we'll have to update the news. We haven't touched on the fact that we're under the cloud of yet another mass shooting. I forgot to bring that up already, and I didn't include it in this morning's post. But Jersey City, New Jersey was the scene of the latest one, and Twitter somewhat upended by the publication of a piece in the New York Times noting that the suspect in the Jersey City shooting, in fact, published anti-Semitic posts, according to officials there. So now there was some question about whether or not the location, a Jewish kosher market, had been targeted. I did see some indication yesterday that police thought that this was as they said, a drug deal gone bad that simply somehow moved into the market across the street. So we'll have to go and find out what happened to that story. And by the way, how many drug deals start out good? Anyway, I'm not really sure how often that happens. All right, we got to take a break. We will catch up after a minute or so and see how much of this information needs to make it on air and prepare for our second hour. We'll be right back. Hey, wait a minute. We won't be right back because I already have discovered another problem. Why is my alarm going off so... Okay. Well, I guess we're still... I guess we'd still be on. Because, I don't know, I set my alarm normally goes off at 9:58, which is now, so the music ought to be starting now. And
it is. I hear the music.
All right, the music's starting. Now I've stopped it. Now I'm starting it again because for whatever reason, I don't know. I guess the other two breaks are at 27, and the third break, in the middle rather, it's just one. I'm explaining it to everybody on the air now as they're listening. Is only 1 minute long. It starts at 9:58, and I think I saw the clock on my computer come up with 57. And said, 57 and 30, time to start the music.
This radio is live. Do not try this at home.
That's right. Okay, now we'll take a break, although we ruined the last minute, so it's like 2 minutes. All right, welcome back now, I think, maybe not, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Or possibly, hope you enjoyed the last extra minute of music here on the Kagro in the Morning Show. I don't know what's happening with that second break. The alarm hasn't changed. I think I just jumped the gun and I saw the 7 minutes and the 7 in the minutes place there on at 9:57. It's an odd thing we have here, but that's why I'm supposed to rely on the alarms. But the last couple of days, I have missed the alarm or ignored the alarm, so all sorts of weird things have been happening. I apologize. And at worst, you get a little bit of extra music. And it's not like the disorganization in between subjects is new to you. So let me jump back, and I guess I won't bother with the background because I'm not all that up to speed on the background of what happened in Jersey City yesterday, except that middle of the day, once again, breaking news of an active shooter, and as it turns out, there are 6 people dead, and I don't know whether that includes our suspect or not. It was mass confusion as usual with these things, but apparently a shooting that started at a cemetery across the street from the kosher market where it all ended, and where it by the time the rest of the world was alerted to it, it had moved over to this kosher market, and so there was some question as to whether or not the market was in fact the target of the shooting, and now they say that it is. So the New York Times has sort of a live update section of their coverage of the story, and top of it at the moment, or at least when I grabbed it off of Twitter, Jersey City shooting, suspect published anti-Semitic posts, official says. Investigators in the firefight that left 6 people dead at a cemetery and kosher market believe the attack was motivated by anti-Semitic and anti-police sentiments, an official said. Michael Gold and Ali Watkins are doing the work on this one. Let's see. It says, I guess the latest at the time that I opened this up was the suspect had published anti-Semitic and anti-police posts online, and officials say camera footage indicates a kosher market was targeted. We'll have to dive into this a little bit and see if we can't unravel it rather quickly, I hope. A suspect involved in a prolonged firefight in Jersey City, New Jersey that left 6 people dead, including 1 police officer, had published anti-Semitic and anti-police posts online, and investigators believe the attack was motivated by those sentiments. A law enforcement official familiar with the case, and it's best if they are, said on Wednesday. The Jersey City mayor said surveillance footage indicated that the 2 shooters had targeted a kosher supermarket where most of the carnage unfolded. Everybody in the cemetery was already dead. I don't know what was going on over there. On Twitter Wednesday, Mayor Stephen Fulop wrote, because it's Twitter, that an extensive review of the city's closed-circuit cameras made it clear that these 2 individuals targeted the kosher grocery location where they opened fire and sparked a gun battle with police officers. Okay, so this is causing a lot of concern, naturally, not just because it's a mass shooting, but because, golly, there's an awful lot of anti-Semitic mass shootings happening lately under the anti-Semitic racist bastard Donald Trump, who just 2 days ago gave a speech to a gathering of American Jewish voters in Florida and told them that you'll all vote for me because you love money so much, which seems like a little kind of a weird thing to tell a group of them, but apparently he thought that was in keeping with what they wanted to hear and how he felt. So great. Now we know where you are on this. And as well as the odd news of the reclassification of Jews as being of a nationality somehow other than American. That seems kind of weird too. The mayor's tweet is embedded in the Times piece here. Let's see. Does it say anything beyond what was summarized last night after extensive review of our closed-circuit CCTV system? It has now become clear from the cameras that these 2 individuals targeted the kosher grocery location on MLK Drive. The 2 Jersey City Police Department officers that were on a foot post 1 block away immediately responded and engaged. The mayor has not said whether the violence was related to anti-Semitism. What are we doing here? Though in a follow-up post on Twitter, he said the hate and anti-Semitism have never had a place in Jersey City. And okay, that's nice. The law enforcement official could not provide more details about the suspect's online posts or where they had been published. He said that investigators were still reviewing that information. So far, the authorities have not identified the shooters who were killed or not publicly identified, I guess, who were killed in the firefight. Okay, so that answers that question. None of the 3 victims inside the store has been publicly identified by officials. The Jersey City police officer who was killed was identified on Tuesday as Detective Joe Seals. Okay, so I guess here's some background. We can provide it this way. Before the gun battle, there was a shooting at a cemetery. Detective Seals approached the 2 suspects, a man and a woman, who were inside a U-Haul van at a cemetery. And I guess that would raise an eyebrow for me, too. A U-Haul van in a cemetery. There's cheap ways to do funerals, but I never heard of that one. Near the kosher market. And this is interesting. So he went to approach them in this van because the van had been linked to a homicide over the weekend. How do you like that? So there's some actual police detective work going on here, and another homicide elsewhere. That's what the law enforcement officials are saying. The official did not have any more details on the homicide. I'd like to get some news about that. I'm sure that's forthcoming shortly. Video surveillance footage shows the suspects shooting the detective and then driving away and ending up in front of the kosher market where they park and enter the store, guns firing, the official said. That's, I guess, how they decided that it was a target. And I suppose they're right about that. For much of at least the next hour, residents nearby and blocks away could hear rapid bursts of gunfire coming from the area around the market. Investigators later found a live pipe bomb inside the van. Initially, investigators said they believed the market was a random choice by the shooters and that the episode was not a hate crime. The city's director of public safety said at the afternoon news conference there was no indication of terrorism. But by Tuesday night, Mayor Fulop had said on Twitter that officials now believe that there was targeting. I guess from there, I'm sure we're up to date, all of us, on how things developed. On Wednesday morning, detectives were at the Jersey City kosher supermarket canvassing the crime scene as a number of uniformed police officers stood watch outside. Officials said that 5 people, including the 2 shooters, were killed in the battle at the market on Tuesday. So we all probably saw that unfolding yesterday in video clips that were circulating on Twitter and elsewhere. So I don't know, a situation to keep an eye on, and worrisome to say the least. I think we'll leave the executive order idea for a later time when we can digest it a little bit better. I don't think we're going to get through it and be able to work out an understanding of either what they thought they were doing or what the secret agenda was, if any, at least not in the next few minutes. So I think we'll leave it off there and just sort of keep in mind that weird and terrible things are happening in the United States, and that Donald Trump is the driver of these weird and terrible things. Okay, so let's see. Where can we go for a couple of minutes of news and information? I'm not certain what Jones' status is today. Let's see. Oh, okay. Now I'm getting a better idea. We'll have to make it short, and looks like it's going to have to be the last segment of the day. So I guess we got a couple of minutes to get into one of the bigger stories, and then maybe after the last break, we'll be able to visit with Joan for just a little bit. Gosh, there's a lot of directions we could be going with this one. Let's see. How about let's throw this one in. I have a piece from our friend in the Twitter sphere, our longtime blogging pal, Boo Man, now going, of course, out in the open as Martin Longman. But he's got a piece over at his progresspond.com blog that I thought was interesting and, of course, relevant, and just generally a good reminder of just how bad Donald Trump is. So, of course, here we are impeaching him for obstruction of Congress and for, what else did we decide? Abuse of power. But good reminder here. There are, of course, a million things that we could be impeaching him for, and this is as good as any. And, in fact, it's backed up with a little fact that will help boil the blood once again. Trump, he says, should have been impeached over North Korea. How about that for a curveball? I mean, most of us will agree off the bat, probably. But let's look at the reasons why. In an ideal world, he writes, a president would be removed from office if they demonstrated an obvious basic lack of competency for the job, even if they were not engaged in any unethical or criminal activities. True, unless you are of the same party as that president. President Trump will be impeached for contempt of Congress and abuse of power, but he ought to be retired for the simple reason that his foolishness and stupidity, which is something that the North Koreans are saying about him again, is a danger to the country and all of humanity. This can be seen in excerpts from Peter Bergen's new book, and that's where we're really going with all this. Trump and His Generals, The Cost of Chaos. And I know Greg appreciates the mention of chaos. Bergen describes an Oval Office meeting on North Korea in mid-April 2017, in which Trump was shown a coffee table-sized model of North Korea's nuclear facilities during a briefing on the regional threat they pose. So they bought some visual aids for him to try and understand the situation, right? The excerpt from the book reads, Trump was also shown a satellite image of the Korean peninsula at night, showing the lights of China and South Korea and the blackness of North Korea in between. Trump initially mistook the void for an ocean, and that's not hard to do. I don't know if I blame him for that, unless you know geography, which he doesn't. Anyway, when he was shown the bright lights of Seoul, just 30 miles south of the demilitarized zone separating the two Koreas, the president asked, why is Seoul so close to the North Korean border? And maybe that's not a good phrasing of the question. I guess if you give him the benefit of the doubt, like, oh my goodness, I'm just learning this, but why? Well, okay. Well, we know why, and it's because that's where it is. Indeed, why is a city of 9.8 million people located where it is located? Why not pick it up like a campsite and move it to a safer area? Martin writes. But wait, it gets dumber. Next excerpt. Trump had been repeatedly told that U.S. freedom of action against North Korea was constrained by the fact that the regime's artillery could demolish the South Korean capital in retaliation for any attack, inflicting mass casualties on its population of 25 million. Interesting. So he puts, I guess, the idea of is the population of all of South Korea 25 million, or is it the greater Seoul area as opposed to the 9.8 million living in Seoul proper that Martin was citing? Well, anyway, so here's the deal, right? The generals are telling him the problem with dealing with North Korea is the North Koreans don't have to have missiles and don't have to roll tanks across the border and defeat our military. They can lob shells from their own territory and destroy Seoul. That's why it's such a dangerous situation. And Trump's answer is, in case you thought that he was just phrasing his question strangely by saying, why is Seoul so close to the North Korean border? He answers, they have to move, Trump said, according to Bergen, who adds that his officials were initially unsure if the president was joking, which is what they'll say now. But Trump then repeated the line, they have to move. Martin, chiming back in here, it's hard to imagine a dumber reaction to this briefing. At the time, North Korea had been taking extremely provocative actions, including missile tests, and Trump was calling Kim Jong-un Rocket Man and threatening his nation with annihilation. Back to the book. North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States, Mr. Trump told reporters at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey, where he is spending, at the time, much of the month on a working vacation. I would say, quote unquote, working. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen. You remember that one? Referring to North Korea's volatile leader, Kim Jong-un, Mr. Trump said, he has been very threatening beyond a normal state. And as I said, they will be met with fire and fury, and frankly, power the likes of which this world has never seen before. So it's the same words over again with a different dressing on the word salad. The national security team, Martin says, was attempting to explain to Trump that his rhetoric was irresponsible and extremely dangerous, but he did not want to accept responsibility for what he had already done. It must be Seoul's fault for being so foolishly establishing itself at its present location, at around the time Julius Caesar was crossing the Rubicon, by the way, he notes. Trump's instruction to relocate Seoul was ignored for obvious reasons, but he later acted impulsively again in a way that threatened economic disruption and even nuclear war. Again from the book, after watching a retired four-star general, Jack Keane, interviewed on Fox News in late January 2018, saying that U.S. troops deployed to South Korea should not take their families with them, Bergen reports that Trump told his national security team, I want an evacuation of American civilians from South Korea. A senior official warned that such an evacuation would be interpreted as a signal that the U.S. was ready to go to war and would crash the South Korean stock market. But Trump, who probably owns no South Korean stocks, is reported to have ignored the warning, telling his team, go do it. Alarmed Pentagon officials ignored the order again, and according to Bergen, Trump eventually dropped the idea. Ignoring Trump's orders was a regular strategy for the Pentagon under the leadership of Defense Secretary James Mattis, we're told. And now back to the book again. It was one of a number of occasions that the Defense Secretary at the time, James Mattis, ignored direction from the White House. He also refused to send Defense Department officials to a planned Korea war game at Camp David in the autumn of 2017, or to provide military options for intercepting North Korean ships suspected of sanctions busting. Back to Martin here. It's not acceptable for the Pentagon to ignore presidential direction or to defy direct orders, but any fair-minded person would admit that the alternative in many of these examples would have been worse. When the country and the world faces this kind of threat, the reasonable thing to do is to get the responsible people together and initiate a change of power. You can call it a coup if you want, but we have legal and constitutional provisions that include the 25th Amendment and the impeachment process for dealing with a president who cannot be trusted to carry out national security policy. It's not necessary for the military to seize power from civilians, nor would that be preferable. Ultimately, Trump is being impeached over his foreign policy with respect to Russia and Ukraine, but it was reckless to let him remain as president past the spring of 2017. It says but I guess he means it was in May of 2017 that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein seriously raised the prospect, remember this, of invoking the 25th Amendment to remove Trump from power. Back to the book, once again, the Deputy Attorney General, Rod J. Rosenstein, suggested last year that he secretly record President Trump in the White House to expose the chaos consuming the administration. And he discussed recruiting cabinet members to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove Mr. Trump from office for being unfit. Mr. Rosenstein made these suggestions in the spring of 2017 when Mr. Trump's firing of Jim Comey as FBI director plunged the White House into turmoil. Over the ensuing days, the president divulged classified intelligence to Russians in the Oval Office, and of course they were back in there yesterday, and revelations emerged that Mr. Trump had asked Mr. Comey to pledge loyalty and end an investigation into a senior aide, which is, of course, exactly what he accuses the Bidens of in Ukraine, but never mind, we all forgot about that. Martin jumps back in here. Rosenstein was correct and drew the proper conclusions about Trump's fitness for office. Unfortunately, nothing was done at that time, and Trump continued to put our nation and our allies and all humanity at risk. Nuclear war. I mean, it's a real thing. This should alarm anyone because Trump and Kim Jong-un's bromance is now over, and they're back where they began. And a quote here, I don't know if we're going back to the book here or not, or whether this is a new news report that he's borrowing from here. But the North Korean leadership is threatening the resumption of missile tests. And a war of words between Trump and Kim Jong-un is simmering once more. Trump has resurrected his nickname for Kim, Rocket Man. North Korea conducted a missile engine test at a site that it had previously mothballed, and on Monday, a senior regime official called the U.S. president a, quote, heedless and erratic old man. And Martin's conclusion here, it does not appear that Trump learns anything, ever, so you shouldn't be surprised if he resurrects his desire to remove all American civilians from the Korean Peninsula and to relocate Seoul to a safer location. That's the end of the piece, but it's a good reminder of how many times Donald Trump has pretty clearly demonstrated the danger of allowing him to continue in office, even independent of the fact that he plans to cheat in 2020 with foreign assistance the way he cheated in 2016, and thereby capture the White House again a second time. It's pretty damn dangerous. And by the way, I mean, like I said, there's a million things you could throw out there. I would have impeached him over Puerto Rico, the hurricane response, quite honestly. But I guess we're not going to get around to that one. Speaking of Puerto Rico, I guess we could make this shift. Do I have the article at hand? Probably not close at hand, but I know that while we're racking up impeachable offenses, there it is. I think I got it. And by the way, they should start as soon as possible on the impeachment of Attorney General Barr as well, and I think we're all agreed there. Maybe we ought to throw in Ben Carson, just for good measure. There are others that I think should come before him, but he's been laying low for quite a while since he had the furniture controversy, and it's nice to see him back in the impeachable offenses news. HUD Secretary Ben Carson has been illegally withholding aid to Puerto Rico for months, as it turns out. That's actually the headline on the diary on the subject from Saturday from our Daily Kos's own SemDem, a friendly neighborhood community member who put this thing up. And did I put the articles that they were relying on alongside this, or did I just figure I would use the links from there? Yeah, I guess that must be it. All right, so we'll read the diary and go branch outward from there. The Department of Housing and Urban Development under Ben Carson had a legally required deadline back in September to make desperately needed hurricane relief funding still available to the suffering American island. The housing agency was supposed to issue funding notices to 18 states and territories affected by hurricanes on September 4th. They did so with one exception, Puerto Rico. Donald Trump and Ben Carson are refusing to release the aid. Does that sound familiar to you? Refusing to release the aid in direct opposition to the congressional mandate, which is weird because he keeps doing this over and over again. In, for instance, I'll throw you a curveball, Lebanon, where he did the same exact thing. And of course, everybody's mind first went to Ukraine. In other words, a pattern of simply telling Congress, maybe you don't hold the purse strings after all. Or maybe there's no such thing. Or maybe I don't care. Or I never read the Constitution. Or you're never going to make me read the Constitution. Donald Trump and Ben Carson, again, refusing to release aid, though directed by a duly adopted appropriations measure from out of the Congress. HUD officials even told the House Appropriations Subcommittee that they just won't do it. Period. We're just not gonna. I know what the law says, just not doing it. Not only did HUD officials admit that they are willfully defying the law, but they also admitted that they have, quote, no statutory authority to miss such a deadline. That's the problem with some of these statutes. It was just assumed at the time they were written, well, of course, no one will just simply ignore them. They're statutes, so there's no line in there about what to do if somebody just doesn't do it. Who goes to jail? What's the punishment? Is it a fine? Do we get to punch the guy in the face? What happens? Nothing. So we don't know. So why are they doing it? Because laws don't matter in Trump land. And Trump hates Puerto Rico. Yeah, well, that pretty much covers it. Looks like SemDem's been borrowing from a couple of, is it the same one? NBC News reports here. It appears to be the same one, so maybe we'll just open up the NBC News piece if we need some supplemental information. Just as Trump does with California, another place he hates, where in the past 2 years raging wildfires have killed 87 people and burned more than 2.15 million acres, Trump is now threatening to withhold federal aid for firefighters for no other reason than his animosity towards the state and its people. Another gigantic danger, by the way, for which he should absolutely be impeached immediately, just on its face, but isn't included in these articles of impeachment. And I know that the likelihood of them revisiting impeachment as a subject with other articles, even related to Ukraine, is next to zero. But they really ought to be considering that possibility. And quite honestly, there's nothing that the Senate will spend its time on that I want them spending their time on. I would say, like a conveyor belt, send them impeachment articles every couple of weeks and keep them forced to stay in trial after trial after trial, because once they emerge from the trials, they're just going to be appointing more horrible judges to the bench, and we might as well occupy as much of their time as possible. Anyway, our break is coming up, but let me tell you a little bit more about this, so we'll at least finish out this paragraph. Trump's now threatening to withhold the federal aid for firefighters just because he hates California, of course. The official reason Trump has given, believe it or not, is that they wouldn't listen to his brilliant idea of raking the forests like he thinks they do in Finland, which is along the same lines as his idea of nuking hurricanes. It's a stupid idea from an uneducated man, and yet the real reason is hatred. Well, I'm not going to be able to fit the rest of the article or the diary in before the break comes, but I'm throwing that out there. If somehow withholding aid from American territories isn't enough from you, there's withholding aid from actual American states as well. This is another one of those patterns that comes up in the context of impeachment. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So I think we got the proper flavor from the article, but just a reminder that, just another one of the areas in the same impeachable area where Trump just refuses to abide by the law and forces his cabinet secretaries to go along with it, and they should all be swept out along with him. And it really, honestly, for any other president, it would take about 10 minutes to get that done. You cannot simply ignore congressional appropriations in this way, or at least not in the fashion in which they're doing it. I mean, there is some constitutional leeway for putting a hold on funds while, if you have a real reason and something to review. But of course, you can put that objection on solid legal footing by notifying Congress of your objection and asking for consideration of your reasoning. But if you don't have any, or you're called to the Appropriations Committee to account for your failure to follow through on spending this money and just say, we don't really have any reason to believe that we have the right to do it, we're just not doing it. Well, that's a pretty good impeachment signal right there. I'm pretty amazed that they didn't even try to come up with some kind of stupid explanation for why they. And I guess when pressed, they will. Trump has no problem going back to his old saw about corruption, just as he's constantly says, I'm so worried about corruption in Ukraine. He can lean on old statements about his belief about corruption in Puerto Rico as well. And I guess for some people that will be enough. But it is weird how he drops his huge concerns about corruption every once in a while, like when something else comes on television. All right. Small update here also. Karen D sends along information by way of David Farenthold, who tweets that Donald Trump has now paid the $2 million in damages that he was assessed by a New York judge for misusing money in the Trump Foundation, his charitable foundation, which wasn't actually about charity. An extraordinary punishment, he says, for a sitting president. Perhaps that's true. The question of how extraordinary it is. And perhaps it's true that he actually paid. I will say that he's usually pretty careful about these things, and the language seems clear. The Washington Post piece that Farenthold has produced on the subject says the same thing in the headline. Trump pays $2 million in damages ordered by judge over misuse of charity funds, according to the New York Attorney General. So my immediate question about the tweet was, are you sure that he paid it? I mean, he purportedly pays it, and you're still not wrong even if he has paid it, to say that it was purportedly done. But I guess the New York Attorney General is vouching for it. But I guess the problem could be, unless we read otherwise in the piece, it could be that, well, the judge has ordered it and we believe that that's going to be followed through on. And so we're happy to say that it's being paid and we know where the money's going. But I guess my question is always, can you show me canceled checks or some sort of wire transfer documentation? And, you know, I would assume that the New York Attorney General can do that. And that's an assumption I'm not willing to make for Trump, not only because, you know, he is who he is and I can't stand it anymore, but because, well, actually, I mean, that really wraps it all up. He's constantly lying. He has a huge problem with producing paperwork to back up his claims because he's usually lying. He's a unique case in that sense, although you should always demand proof from everybody. The idea is that it eventually becomes so routine that you stop demanding it from people because they're able to produce it. He's never able to produce it, and it's an ongoing joke. So let's see. They say he paid it. The payment was ordered last month by a New York state judge in an extraordinary rebuke to a sitting president. Trump had been sued in 2018 by the New York Attorney General, who alleged the president had illegally used funds from the Donald J. Trump Foundation to buy portraits of himself, pay off his business's legal obligations, and help his 2016 campaign. Another good reason to impeach him, by the way. The money was split among 8 charities, according to a statement from New York Attorney General Letitia James, whom I have no reason not to trust in this. But because it involves Trump, I'd like to see the paperwork. The charities were the Army Emergency Relief, the Children's Aid Society, City Meals on Wheels, Give an Hour, Martha's Table, the United Negro College Fund, United Way of the National Capital Area, and the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, according to the statement. In addition, Trump agreed to distribute the remaining $1.8 million left in the Donald J. Trump Foundation to the same 8 charities. In all, each charity received $476,140.41, which makes it sound like he saw some documentation on that. Funds have finally gone where they deserve, to 8 credible charities, James said in a statement. My office will continue to fight for accountability because no one is above the law, not a businessman, not a candidate for office, and not even the President of the United States, except he is. In a statement, attorneys for Trump said the legacy of the Trump Foundation, which gave away millions to those in need at virtually no cost, is secure. They did not answer a reporter's query about whether Trump intended to count the court-ordered $2 million payment on his taxes as a charitable deduction, which, I don't know, I guess that's even still possible, but should be disallowed as an additional punishment. The payments bring an end to the life of the Trump Foundation, which Trump started in 1987 to give away proceeds from his book, The Art of the Deal. It went nearly dormant during Trump's lean years in the 1990s, and I think we all know the story from there. But just by way of reminder, I guess we could say he used the charity's cash to buy paintings of himself and sports memorabilia and to pay a $258,000 legal settlement for one of his for-profit clubs. Charity leaders are barred from using their nonprofits' money for personal benefit, of course. And another one of those personal benefit problems for him. Again, a pattern. Trump also used the charity to boost political campaigns. First, Pam Bondi's Florida Attorney General campaign. She's now landed in Washington and is working on his impeachment defense team. The New York Attorney General's suit drew heavily on reporting by the Washington Post and David Fahrenthold himself as well. Oh, yes, I almost forgot this part. Trump also gave away Trump Foundation checks on stage at rallies, despite strict rules barring nonprofit charities from participating in political campaigns. Interesting also, don't forget that he gave away sometimes giant checks from other people's charities in place of checks from his charity because for whatever reason he, I don't know, didn't have the money. Remember when he boycotted one of the Republican debates in favor of what he said was a fundraiser for veterans, and that everybody should send the money to the Trump Foundation and he would distribute it. And then suddenly, well, this is how this whole saga started. David Fahrenthold started investigating, have any veterans charities gotten any money? and no one had gotten any. And then suddenly checks started showing up, or giant novelty checks anyway, for him to give out to these veterans charities after all, although some of those checks said instead the Stuart Rahr Foundation. One of his buddies who lives in Trump Tower with him was fronting the money, and we never really did get to the bottom of that. That would be interesting to find out at this stage of the game. But yeah, I mean, pretty weird. And also another part of yet another pattern, right? It's not until he's caught that he ends up trying to do the no harm, no foul thing, just like with Ukraine, right? He gets caught withholding the funds, and then all of a sudden the funds are released, and they say, hey, what's the problem? But of course, we couldn't get documentation on those funds making it to Ukraine anytime either. So this is happening over and over again. So, keep this stuff in mind, too, when Jerry Nadler keeps using the word pattern in the impeachment process going forward. All right, let's turn quickly right away. Hi, Joan. How you doing?
Good morning.
Hi, and busy day today, as it turns out.
Yes, as usual. It's just, heading into the holidays, we have people out, so.
Why are they leaving? There's holidays coming. Wait for those.
I know.
I don't know. All right, well.
Well, I'm out next week, just to give you a heads up.
Okay. All right, well, we'll take note of that as well. We better make most of it here. What's up?
I saw an interesting note on that case you were just talking about.
Okay. Yeah.
That settlement.
Yeah.
Apparently, the kids are supposed to get training to prevent them from doing this kind of thing before. As part of the settlement, Mr. Trump's 3 children, who are officers of the foundation, Eric, Donald, and Ivanka, were ordered to undergo mandatory training to ensure they do not engage in similar misconduct in the future.
Oh, well, I wonder if
that'll
that'll
work.
Yeah, it didn't take. I'm just predicting ahead of time. But all right, that's interesting. So mandatory training, and one of them claims to work at the White House. I wonder if they're going to sue, or if the Department of Justice will intervene and say you can't force a special assistant to the president to undergo mandatory training while that president is sitting. You say she'll miss out on her opportunity to I don't know what, develop secret friendships with Christopher Steele or something.
Yes.
That's pretty amazing as well.
Somehow I don't think it's going to take anyway, but
no, I doubt it. And
and somehow I think they're probably going to weasel out of the mandatory training some way or another, because this is who these people are. But
yeah, although like Eric will show up and he'll think that it'll be one of those. I'll meet you there, Eric. You go.
Right.
Where is everybody?
I'll take notes for everybody else.
Yeah. Right. Or he'll go 3 times and say they all did it. I sent them their certificates. So they'll probably screw this up.
I have the tiniest bit of sympathy for Eric, and I shouldn't.
Yeah, well, he's portrayed sympathetically
from that
on
initial
SNL.
Foray into foundation work, into a charity, he really seemed initially to have the intent to raise money for kids.
Yeah, he probably saw other people doing that. And said,
that was the old story. I wrote about it a couple of years ago.
I remember it, yeah. I believe we read
his dad sort of co-opted his entire effort and forced him to have the golf tournaments at Mar-a-Lago and that whole thing, and divert all of the money to the Trump organization. But it seemed, at least, that Eric was trying to have a real charity.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe not.
Even if it wasn't him doing the work, it even looked like maybe he asked somebody, so what do I do? And they said, well, form a board. We'll do a golf thing, but have it elsewhere. Although who knows, it might have been the Friends Golf Club. We don't really know for sure.
Very possibly.
But okay, yeah. I mean, he was originally in compliance with his charity, and Dad ruined it, as he does with everything. Everything Trump touches, as they say.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what else on your mind today?
Well, we've got Mark covering the Horowitz testimony in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Okay.
And I just saw a note float by that Lindsey Graham said something about golden showers. So
really,
the highlights from this hearing could be interesting.
Yes, interesting. You would bring that up.
There's an obsession on the Republican side with the Steele dossier's more salacious parts, and trying to say that Democrats are entirely motivated by getting nude pictures of Trump.
No, but that's what they're saying. I mean, I don't know what good that would do. Not only would it hurt everybody, I mean, literally cause everyone pain, but so what, right? I mean, Trump is I think, just not going to be sunk by anything. I mean, unless there's some, maybe an animal in the picture or something. I don't know. But I wouldn't want to see it. It'd be hard to pin on him because no one would want to look at it. But, okay, yeah, that's their obsession. And by the way, I mean, what a horrible time to have hung your hat on that one. And when you're finding out that Ivanka was a friend of Steele's, and we don't even know exactly what that relationship was about. The initial report was, well, we tried to maybe get him to do some work for us, but this morning there are reports that say the relationship was of a personal nature, and I don't know what the hell that means.
Thus far, I've just seen that they had a cordial relationship. I haven't seen that it was more intimate than that. But
this morning,
I haven't been paying a whole lot of attention.
And
so
why would you? But just for shorthand, CNBC is doing the reporting. Ivanka Trump may have had a, quote, personal relationship with dossier author Christopher Steele, according to CNBC. So it's a video. I'll provide a link to everybody. You can take a look on your own time. And it may be worth nothing. It's just weird how these things happen every time with the Trumps. Just a little worse than you thought it was yesterday and the day after that, I'm sure.
Always.
They were married in Vegas, is what we're saying. So, I don't know, that might not be true, but hey, I mean, I guess Trump had a rally in Hershey yesterday where he was deciding that it would be okay to say, I heard a rumor that this, that, and the other thing. So he's just launching things that way again. So I heard a rumor too.
I have not seen the video from that, but I understand that it was perhaps more unhinged than even usual, which would make sense.
Yeah.
He was impeached yesterday. A judge said he couldn't use military construction money for his wall yesterday,
yes,
so
right.
He had kind of a bad time.
Yeah. Well, just one of about 1,000 failures before the courts. This is another major theme of the Trump administration is he says something's going to happen, signs an order, then claims it, and the press plays along and says he did it. And then we find out 6 months later the court says not only didn't he do it, but you're not allowed to, and it's illegal. Yeah.
This time it's in El Paso. He's also being sued in California. That's the case where the Supreme Court said, yeah, sure, you can go ahead and steal this money from the Pentagon and from drug interdiction to build the wall, pending your appeal before the Ninth Circuit. And in the meantime, Mitch McConnell can start loading up the Ninth Circuit with your minions. So that's where we're at. In California, this was a case in El Paso. So,
all right. Well, we'll take it where we can get it, I suppose. All right.
And speaking of larding up the judiciary, there's just another whole slag of confirmations going through today.
Oh. Are they not too busy yet?
They're not too busy yet.
Okay, well, as soon as we hand them the articles of impeachment, that's going to be a fun thing, too, seeing how quickly they react to the articles of impeachment. According to the rules, they've got to have that trial. McConnell's still, I think, sticking with the statement that he won't try to buck that. But
still sticking with that, it seems there's unanimous desire to put it off until after Christmas. House is supposed to vote on it next week.
Okay. So
Senate says they don't want to deal with it until January.
That seems fair, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, even Rand Paul is saying, I'm not going to try to screw this one up. I'm not going to object. Even though the White House wants it to happen immediately.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
White House
he should
is pushing
object.
hard to have it done as soon as possible.
They would be happy about that. I think he'd be afraid to go home, quite honestly. His neighbor is crazy. So he should stay here and do a trial. I'm not going home.
Yeah.
You kidding?
Yeah, but nope.
All right.
Nope, even Rand Paul's not going to raise hell with that one. So.
All right.
So that's where we're at with impeachment.
That's
nice.
He
is not going to be removed by the Senate because
they're terrible.
Because he's not.
Yeah, well, they're Republicans, and that's the way they do things. But we'll see how long the trial lasts, and
Well, and what else happens with this? I know that Schiff has a boatload of things he would still like to get into.
I would love that.
And a rumor from one story last night, I think it was from the Washington Post, said that Nadler really had pushed for expanding the articles to include the obstruction from the Mueller investigation.
That feels like Nadler.
Yeah.
Well, so far, no. But the door is open for it, but I just don't really see it fitting with the strategy of the people who tend to be running the show here. But you can bring more articles later on, and you don't have to tag them onto this one either. I think perhaps once the trial begins over in the Senate, or once the articles are messaged over and the process in the Senate begins, they won't allow for amendment of those articles. But you can send other ones, or even revise the ones you've already sent. There's really nothing that says you can't. Not to mention all the other things for which he should be impeached that have gone, or that weren't included, or even have gone uninvestigated in a high-profile way, like these other charges. There's a million, and they could. To me, it makes sense to just keep the Senate busy with that forever. And,
I would say so.
Yeah.
Although, there's, on the other hand, and I'm sure this is part of McConnell's thinking in pushing this off until January, and the rest of the Republicans, keeping the 5 senators who were still in the presidential race, the 5 Democrats, busy with this, interfering with them trying to be in New Hampshire and Iowa.
Yeah.
So
I don't think that's such a huge punishment.
There's a lot to unpack in all of this.
Right. Well, we'll see how long they work with it. I think they could probably pretty effectively handle things. I know that they would rather be there shaking hands and everything, but I don't foresee Yang overtaking them while they're working on impeachment. Let's say.
No, I don't either.
Okay.
So that's what's going on.
Yeah.
McConnell keeps complaining about how they're not doing, how the House is being obstructionist, and they're all, doing impeachment and nothing else. The Do Nothing Congress. Meanwhile, he said, we're not going to deal with NAFTA 2.0 until after the holidays.
Yeah, that seems weird too. He had spent the morning upset about how it had been delayed by Pelosi, and then he delayed it.
Yeah.
But
because this is just what he does, and he gets away with it again and again and again.
Yeah. Well, all right. Bad news, but infuriating. But I don't know. I guess he knows how to do this in ways that Trump doesn't. Trump too is getting away with it in the sense that he's hasn't been thrown out yet, and he won't be. But I don't know. Somehow it's not working quite the way he had hoped for him. But McConnell's just smoother with that.
He keeps his head down and just plows through and says all of these just remarkably hypocritical things, and for some reason doesn't get a lot of scrutiny for it, more so than he used to. I think we've finally sort of broken through with the traditional media that McConnell is evil and that he does these things, but that's certainly not hampering him from doing these things.
No. Well, you can't stop until he's out, so. Okay.
Which we've got to keep working on.
Yes. As always a possibility. And, things have worked out for Democrats in Kentucky recently, in one case anyway.
Yeah.
So I suppose it could
at the
happen
very
again.
least, we have to work on taking his majority away.
Yes.
That's doable.
Right, that's true. Even if you can't dislodge him, it's possible to leave him a lame duck and force him to sit through a couple of years, or maybe forever, for the rest of his career would be nice, in a minority position and see his interests bulldozed for once.
It would be very nice. It would be very satisfying.
Okay.
Meanwhile, we also have to figure out what to do about all of these horrible judges.
Yeah, and they're getting worse, as I understand it.
They are getting worse. The woman who was approved last week, who is so supposedly pro-life, she opposes in vitro fertilization and surrogacy.
Huh. So pro some lives, if they're already underway, I guess, but that's a weird thing. Usually they're not against that. The more lives, the better.
Right.
Usually the take.
Right. So that was a strange one. She was deemed unqualified by the ABA because she had absolutely no trial experience.
That's usually not good as far as judges go. They're supposed to be in charge of the trials. So.
Yeah,
bad.
They're supposed to know how a trial works.
Right.
That would be helpful.
So what, right? Someone else will tell them. There's a parliamentarian.
Today is going to be Van Dyke. And, gosh, I can't even remember the circuits anymore. Who was deemed unqualified because he's an asshole. Basically.
Wow. Okay, that's a new category.
ABA said they did something like 60 interviews, and the majority said he's untruthful, he's hostile, he's unbending, and really should not be a judge. But
Yeah. I saw Senator Whitehouse circulating a video of some of his appearances, I guess, before the Ninth Circuit, is what it looked like. So, because there were 3 judges up there, so and it was a federal courtroom in San Francisco, and I can't really think of any other reason why there'd be 3 of them. So it must have been,
yes, Van Dyke is to the 9th.
So so he's up there. This is really an interesting dynamic. So there's video of him in arguments before the Ninth Circuit, and doing all the things that they basically tell you, start to finish. You don't do this. So when a judge asks you a question, even if you disagree with it, even if you think it's a stupid question, you wait for the question to be asked and then you address it respectfully. And he's arguing and stopping and holding up his hands like, "Shut up, judge! You're an idiot. You're completely wrong." And okay, bold to say the least, but there are 2 or 3 different scenes in this videotape, which means 2 or 3 different panels of 3 judges, which means now his colleagues who were like, "Who is this jackass? Get out of my court," are now, he's going to be a judge with them, and they can't throw him out. And I'm sure Trump loves that.
And specifically on the Ninth Circuit, on sort of the circuit that saved us from Trump thus far. It's now a Trump court.
Well, it's been a huge complaint for Republicans for a long time that the Ninth Circuit this, Ninth Circuit that, because, it involves California.
Well, yeah, up until Trump, they were trying to abolish it.
Yes.
They were trying to argue that it just needed to be dissolved.
Right. Or split it into other ones, right. So now they've just taken it over by placing people on it who just are going to either do what they want or what they're ordered to do, and they won't know any different because they've never, operated in a courtroom before. At least this guy has been in a courtroom. He's not properly, and he wasn't handling
not properly, and he's proving himself disqualified for judiciary lifetime appointment. But hey,
yes. How many are they up to?
Makes the 8th or 9th
of their unqualified.
And of the unqualified judges pushed to this point. I think 2 of them have been withdrawn. I think that's what it is. I think 9 have been nominated, 2 have been withdrawn, and 7 ended up going to courts. I believe that's the count so far.
Amazing.
Which blows every other president out of the water in terms of bad judges.
Yeah, I mean, but not just bad. Yeah, people who have been deemed unqualified by the American Bar Association, which used to have. I mean, that used to be the kiss of death. It's just done. The Bar Association says they're not qualified. Done. And I mean, a few people have made it through. 1 or 2 at most from other presidents, and he's got 7.
Yep.
It's not even the worst of them. Okay.
Mitch McConnell.
Yeah. Well done there, Mitch. Can't wait to be rid of him. Tough spot today. All right, well, another busy day. Thanks for coming by. Just to shake things up a little bit and let us hear your voice again after a couple of weeks. Appreciate it.
And it'll be another couple of weeks before I talk to you. Because,
yeah. So
you're not doing a Christmas show, are you?
That's not my plan.
2 weeks.
I'm going to. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so get your shopping done, I guess. Bring our patriotic duty, I think, to do our shopping. I was told that once a long time ago. I'm very old. So, anyway, I appreciate it all. Have a nice week next week, and then 2 weeks after that, have a great Christmas break. And
all right.
Well, we'll just wait. We'll just have to wait and see what happens.
That'll be a slow week. I'll call in.
She'll be back soon. 2 weeks. We'll see what happens. Thanks very much, Joan. Appreciate it, and take care. I'll talk to you between now and then.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
So what else would you like to know about? It doesn't matter what it is. Justice Putnam's got it covered on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next. For example, the Supreme Court's latest move on abortion approves torture on the pregnant. That seems like an interesting way of putting it, but why not? Look, it's unwanted, right? You know what he's talking about. Let him fill you in on the details. Stay tuned.